Bjorn Stigson, thank you for joining us from Geneva. We appreciate your time. But right now we'd like to talk to you about the financial crisis that's sweeping Europe where you are and the rest of the developed world. Sustainability must surely be the last item on the agenda, given that business is facing such an uncertain future.
We have to remember that sustainability is the combination of the economy, the environment and the social structure. And if the economic pillar is shaking, then it will have an impact. There will be issues for those companies that needs to refund their loans. That will be more difficult. So certainly these issues will have an impact. What I think we are going to see is a stronger drive on efficiency coming out of this. Companies will be looking at their use of materials, their use of energy and their overall efficiency. And driving those efficiencies will be good for sustainability.
So what will be the business context of sustainability from here on?
We have four what we call focus areas for the World Business Council. Energy and climate is one, and that's where at the moment the biggest interest is for business. The second one we call development, and that's around trade, the developing countries, the emergence of China and India, technology transfer, intellectual property rights, a whole set of other issues. The third focus area we call ecosystems, and that's about how do we integrate decision-making between the economy and the environment? How do we put a price on ecosystem services so we can take integrated decisions? And the fourth focus area we call the business role, which is about what is the role of business in a society which is resource and carbon constrained going forward.
Bjorn, you're on record, on your website, on your blogs, and through the many interviews that you've given on this topic, saying that technology or technology shifts will play a very big role in getting us to a sustainable future. Do you believe nuclear energy will be playing a bigger role?
Yes, nuclear will have to play a role. And it is playing a role. 17% of the world's electricity is generated by nuclear today. And we haven't built many new nuclear plants, so they are aging. So we have, in the first instance, to replace what we have, which is around 450 nuclear plants around the world. And then we have to increase the share of that. That is very much also in the analysis made by the International Energy Agency in Paris. And the OECD is saying the same thing. So nuclear will play a role, but it's not the solution.
How do you see the balance in that mix? Should it be viewed country by country, situation by situation?
The decisions on investments are country decisions, and the energy mix are very different in different countries. I'm Swedish by origin. Sweden is generating all their electricity from hydro and nuclear. I live in Switzerland with a lot of hydro. I'm very close to France, where we've got 70% nuclear. On the other hand, I'm an advisor to the Chinese government that is heavily dependent on coal. So it's very different in different parts of the world. But if we look at the global situation, fossil fuels will continue to be the main fuel for a very long time for electricity generation. And then you will have a share of nuclear, you will have a share of hydro, renewables will grow, but it's still a small portion of the overall energy mix. Fossil fuels are here to stay for a very long time, and how long time they will stay depends partly on technology, what we can do to utilize them in a more clean way, like carbon capture and storage from coal-fired power stations, for instance.
Carbon emissions reduction targets have become quite a vexed issue for governments and business. How much disruption do you believe a 50% reduction in carbon emissions would cause? Would it, for example, cause as much trouble as the present financial meltdown?
Well, first of all, let's remember that the 50% is not the European number. 50% is the number that the G8 have agreed to. At the G8 summit in July in Hokkaido, they confirmed their long-term ambition to reduce carbon emissions with 50%, including the United States. So that's a a global number, and it has become kind of a truth that this is what we are aiming for. And they've also then said that if we look at the minus 50% globally, then the industrialized world will have to do more, 60 to 80%, as some governments have already said, both Japan actually and some of the European governments. And if we are going to reduce carbon emissions with that kind of number in 42 years' time, it will have very substantial impacts on society. I don't know what the society looks like that reduces carbon with 50%, carbon emissions with 50%, but it certainly will look different. It won't look the same, and it will be major impacts on lifestyles and consumption patterns, and it will be a very tough transition. There will be winners and losers in that transition.
And you believe it would take many, many decades to get to that point, if indeed we did get there?
Yes, it will take many decades, and it will be a transformational challenge for society. It will mean a very different society going forward. But if science is right, and we, from the World Business Council, we don't dispute the science. We say the science as presented by the IPCC, we accept. And if we accept that, and we have to do this kind of reductions, then it will mean very big investments. You know, the International Energy Agency is talking about investments annually in the energy system of around $1 trillion. So if you compare that with the money that is now being discussed in the financial crisis, we talk about $1 trillion per year, every year from 2005 to 2050. So that's $45 trillion into the energy system up to 2050. Actually, in January, we had a meeting with the International Energy Agency. They presented their energy technology perspectives to 2050. Or rather, they had a draft of that report that was then launched later on during the spring. And we brought together 40 chief technology officers from some of the biggest energy-related companies globally, and that represent very substantial R&D activities. And we asked them, do you think that this report, these actions to get to minus 50% by 2050 are reasonable? Can that be done? And their conclusion was, from a technology perspective, it can be done. But the big question will there be a policy framework from governments that will be supportive and that will deploy this technology? That is really where the bottleneck is.
And possibly that education has to come from people like SKM to educate the politicians. We are, after all, collectively a group of scientists, engineers and project managers. What do you see as our role in the scheme of things?
Well, I think business has not only SKM, but business in general has a responsibility to tell governments what is doable, looking at what kind of actions do we think can be implemented and under what circumstances. And certainly companies like SKM that is very engaged in the infrastructure of society has an important role to play. We are, in a way, as the World Business Council, providing the broader platform for leading global companies to punch above their weight as individual companies by providing a coalition of progressive companies to try to get that message across.
Bjorn, I want to ask you a question about long-term business thinking and why it must necessarily contain sustainability. Now, what competencies do organisations need to survive beyond this point?
Well, I think when we look at the future world, we look at the world which is going to be a constrained world. It will be constrained by the ability to emit carbon and some other pollutants. It will be constrained by the access to resources. We are looking at the world which is likely by 2050 going to have 9 billion people compared to 6-something at this point in time. So we will have a world which will be constrained. And the ability to understand those constraints and what it's going to mean for strategy, for your business model, for your operations will be crucial for business. And some companies invest in fixed assets for very long times into the future. I mean, if you build a power plant today, it's going to be around at 2050. If you build a paper mill, it's going to be around. So the ability to think about what is the operating environment going to look like in decades to come will be very important. And it will be a very different operating environment.
So you have a strong belief that the world, through technology, can overcome these challenges.
Business can overcome these challenges. We can deliver the technology. We can deliver the solutions. The big challenge is to make sure that we have a supportive framework from governments whereby we can put these solutions into reality, into actions. And that's, I think, what business has to tell governments, that this is a situation where there is a need for leadership and to think long-term in politics. And we can deliver if we get the right framework.
Bjorn Stigson, thank you so much for talking to us at SKM. We appreciate your valuable insight.
My pleasure.